Hello, my name is Manley Hadley. This is Triumph of the Now TV, hashtag TOTNTV. This episode features an interview with the poet Chris Jones, who speaks at length about his experiences working as a poet in residence in Nottingham Prison in the 90s. This is some really interesting stuff, really intense here, and I'm just going to present it unedited because I think it was a really interesting chat. I read there used to be a writer in residence at a prison.
I did.
How was that? What did that involve?
It kind of changed my life really. I just won a Gregory Award as a poet, which is like for poets under 30, and it was quite a prestigious award. So I got paid well for it, and it actually sort of means doors open for you. People know that you've got a Gregory Award. So I actually applied for a job at Nottingham Prison, and on the back of that, I think basically they gave it me, and it was my first full-time teaching experience, really, sort of intense teaching experience.
In the teaching in the prison?
Yeah, I've done a bit of teaching before that, both academic and creative writing, but this was the first time I'd really thought about how to teach creative writing to a group of men who were difficult on the whole, you know, because of the circumstance they're in. They're incarcerated, but also carrying a lot of baggage with them. And I was fortunate in that they gave me keys so I could go anywhere in the prison, and so I could wander around. So I taught in classrooms, but also visited men in their cells. And as a writer, I don't think you can't escape from actually talking to people about their lives, and also just absorbing the environment, because it's an incredibly intense, testosterone-filled kind of container, really. So you're dealing with men's frustrations and their past lives, which are often very damaged. But out of that, you get conversations, you get dialogue, you get people interested in writing poetry, writing their memoirs, writing fiction. So you build up relationships with the men. I mean, I found it very difficult. I mean, I left early. I didn't do the 2 years that I was meant to do. I lasted about a year and a half, just under a year and a half, because I found it really because I carried the prison out with me into the world. I couldn't leave it behind. I just started thinking about it, and I couldn't flip the off switch. And so it kind of took over my life really. But what it did do was it made my writing, it gave me something to write about in a very kind of, you know, palpable way. I had something to write about that, you know, it's a very sort of privileged experience I had of meeting these men, you know, and talking to them about their difficult lives. And, you know, I was working with lifers, so men have done really kind of bad crimes, terrible things. So they were in the system for 10 to 15 years. But I was also dealing with men who were there on remand, who were waiting trial, who were yet to be proved guilty. They could be innocent, they could have left, and I knew men who left.
Did they seem different?
They were very different, yeah. Because the men who were on remand still had a bit of the street in them. You know, they had house keys, they still had girlfriends, and they had family, and they had all these connections with the outside world, and they still seemed quite fresh and kind of, you know, lively. The life was more entrenched in the fact that they were within the system. They'd been there for 10, possibly 15 years. They were, you know, it's almost like they were a lot more sluggish in a way.
Is there sort of something lost rather than something gained?
Well, that's the thing about writing, is that you hope that you can inspire them to recapture something of the out in them, so they can reflect on the trees, grass, you know, stuff that they might not actually come into contact with.
I it was quite a trite question, but were there views from the prison?
There were. I mean, the wall blocked. If you go up to the fourth floor, which is prisons usually have 4 levels, then you could see over into what people thought was Nottingham, but actually you were looking away from Nottingham a lot of the time. Sherwood, it was in Sherwood, which is interesting because that's associated with Robin Hood, obviously. So there's a thieves connection there. But you could see out, there were views out, but again, it's a very controlling environment. So they moved from often one of the best jobs in the prison was actually being a cleaner. So you would actually clean the yards. So you could be outside. You could wander around outside. Just as I was arriving, they were shutting down the swimming pool. So there used to be a swimming pool that the prisoners used, and they were kind of bricking it over, which is sort of, was a great metaphor, really, and, for what was happening within prisons at the time. But it made my writing so much stronger, because I had a focus, but also it meant I felt much more kind of carefully about language, because language is the way that people were framed within prison. So you could talk about someone being a murderer. That was their label. That's who they were. Rather than them being John, they were a murderer, or they could have been a paedophile, or they could have been a racist. So, it's a rapist. So, it's got all these different kind of... and language is the way that is how you negotiate prison. Because you have to use language to get by with people and get on with people and communicate with people, and you're in this environment where you can't run away. You've got to be there, you've got to talk to people, you've got to negotiate with people. You can't just sit in your cell 24 hours a day, you have to go out and talk to people. So language becomes a really kind of, it's like an element, it's something everyone swims in, and some people are better swimming than others. Some people swim in it, and some people drown. They just can't cope with the language, with the kind of the forms, with the bureaucracy, with the system, and particularly with life, as they have to express their own guilt. They have to express the fact that they've done something wrong to progress through the system. So they have to find that articulation to actually say, yes, I did this, and I feel, I'm sorry for doing this. So I met men who said, I did not commit this crime. And by saying that, it meant that they would be inside longer because they couldn't, because
they weren't admitting to it.
They weren't admitting it, or that they were innocent, and then they were sticking up for the fact that they were innocent. You do occasionally. I found a couple of men who said, "I did not commit that crime. I will never say I did it." So actually, they'll spend longer in prison. So language for them becomes a barrier. Then,
Is there sort of the labels of the crimes they had committed? Is that the way sort of prison officers would introduce people to you?
No, not at all. No. I think you know if you go to the lifers wing that there will the range of crimes that you have on the whole, most of them were some were in for manslaughter, most were in for murder. Mm-hmm. But remand is a lot different because you don't quite know what their crimes, alleged crimes are going to be or were. And they might not want people to know anyway, because particularly if it's particularly savage or nasty crime, they can make, it's the way. The other thing is that prisons are very good for stories, because what do you believe in a prison? What someone tells you, do you believe it or do you take it with a pinch of salt? And all these fabulous stories turn up at your doorstep, in terms of saying, well, there'll be a story about a particular prisoner, about what he or he did. And do you believe that story or not? Because there will be reasons why that story is circulating.
So is there a lot of storytelling within the prison?
There is, because people have time on their hands to actually entertain each other. It was interesting when I was there. They started introducing television, so that almost, which I think actually was regarded as good thing by the prison authorities, because they could police the prisoners more, because they would spend less time on the landing. They'd spend more time in their cells, sitting in their cells watching television, rather than wandering around. So it's a way of controlling prisoners.
I think the swapping of swimming pools for televisions is it's quite a hefty metaphor, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
But did you find them responsive to
on the whole, none of them were forced to do it, because it just wouldn't work.
Yeah.
They had to actually admit to being writers or wanting to write. So again, the pressures were different for different people. So for the remand prisoners, a lot of it was actually writing to their girlfriends and their wives, saying how much they loved them, and their mums as well, actually, interestingly enough. So it was, for them, it was about keeping that connection going with the outside world, and reassuring the girlfriends and the wives that they still loved them, and also please don't go off with someone else, sort of thing. That kind of
fear.
That fear, that they would be abandoned. I think. But for the lifers, it was more reflective. They were thinking back. they were thinking back on often their childhoods, which were often troubled, damaged, but also they were kind of creating these worlds, these strange sort of sci-fi or kind of, so it's this form of escapism, I suppose.
Did a lot of them read as well?
There was a library which the guy one of the guys who interested me most was Lawrence, and he was a poet and he read a lot and he was just a really interesting man, and he very thoughtful, very kind, and he read a lot. I mean, you find there were men inside who got an education as well. Actually, for them it was almost like their saving grace that they got an education. They read books, they came out with a degree, and so actually strangely it actually kind of changed their lives for the better. I mean, my approach is more short term in a way, but I was hoping they would carry on writing, and some of the men did. I think carried on writing.
That's good. Do you feel how masculine an environment it was impacted on the way people behaved?
Yes, I guess so. I mean, the idea of sort of structures and alpha males and kind of pecking orders was there. There's quite a lot of women in prison, I think probably teachers, guards, governors, psychologists. It wasn't as if it was like an all-male environment. It was actually, there was an interesting kind of mixture really. But actually on the wing itself, often it was just the men. You kind of get reminded, because you're looking from the outside in, really, and you only get little kind of glimpses of prison, because you're just there for a brief time, and even though I could wander around, it was still, you see two men interact with each other in a slightly aggressive way, and you kind of wonder what's going on, but then you move on, you're going somewhere else. So you kind of get hints of there being sort of issues and trouble and possibly, violence. You see prison officers with bruises, and some days you return to work and you see, people are injured or people have been ghosted. They've been moved out of prison because they've got into trouble or they've been violent, or there's something gone on, but you never find out the story. So you have to so your imagination is sort of thinking, not making it up, but you're kind of working out what's been going on. But
everyone's trying to do the same.
I think so, up to a point. I mean, particularly as a writer, you go in and you start constructing these sort of this sort of tableau, or these ideas about the backstory and who they are now and where they might be in the future, and you're trying to work out, why they did certain things or what happened to them, and writers are interested in that sort of thing, aren't they? So you're always trying to construct a kind of, from people, a character or a kind of the narrative. But masculinity is, I mean, it's the scene through which, there's a scene through prison of masculinity and kind of, a kind of, it's almost like a smell, really. One of the things that I'll never forget about prison is the smell of prison. And that's sort of, it's a mixture of kind of sweat and bleach and kind of testosterone. And you can't, that's sort of, you wouldn't make much money out of it as a perfume. But it's there. It's something that sort of clings to you.
Like a school changing rooms,
but much worse, with the underlying odour of sort of threat. There was always a sense of threat, I always found. I mean, I try to be suggest I was sort of paranoid or felt vulnerable myself, but it's a bit like being in a situation where the metaphorical volume is turned to 10 always, and it's just sort of it's palpably kind of zoning in on your sensations, feelings, emotions, the senses. It's all very intense. The light is very bright. You hear noises, you smell things. The surfaces are very sort of smooth on the whole, and kind of, cold.
So you never sort of forget where you are?
You never forget where you are.
Is that part of the punishment?
I think so, yeah. It's part of security is the thing, so they have to, you can't open the window fully of a cell. You only can open it a few inches, because it's been decreed that's, you can only push it so far out for whatever reason. There are reasons why, you can't open the window fully, and there's and it's interesting because there was a Victorian wing, which was the old, that was where the remand prisoners were, and there were these new wings where the lifers were. So this strange mixture of Victorian kind of architecture and, Oscar Wilde wouldn't look out of place walking down B wing, but going to D wing, and it's just been built for the lifers, and it's new and it's shiny, and there's more light there because it's very dark in the remand wing actually. It's slightly, because all of the panes have kind of had a century of kind of dirt, kind of. but it's still the same sort of pressure going on in both of them. The sort of pressure that you were feeling.
They're still very functionalist, but just different versions of that. That's great.
Is that all right?
Yeah, that's perfect.